It was raining the night Alexander King's world collapsed, the kind of cold, relentless downpour that feels like the sky itself is mourning. Inside his penthouse on the Upper East Side, everything was still, except for the sound of shattered glass under his Italian leather shoes. He stood frozen in the doorway of the master bedroom, the image before him searing itself into his memory like a brand. Rebecca, his fiancée, the woman who'd graced magazine covers beside him, was tangled in silk sheets with a man Alexander knew too well, his rival, and she didn't even look surprised. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. "Alex," she started, but the words fell dead in the air. His gaze didn't flinch. He simply stared, 1,000 thoughts clashing behind his eyes. He didn't shout, he didn't rage. That wasn't his style. For a man known for commanding boardrooms with silence, this betrayal was louder than any storm. The other man, shirtless and smug, tried to grab his watch from the nightstand. "I didn't know she was—" But Alexander raised a single hand, and the man stopped talking, retreating like a shadow. He didn't ask questions. There was nothing left to say. He turned, the click of his polished shoes against marble echoing like gunshots through the apartment. Outside, the city blurred behind rain-streaked windows. Inside him, something ancient and unforgiving began to stir. Rebecca ran after him, wrapped in nothing but guilt and silk. "Alex, wait! This doesn't mean anything." But that was the thing about betrayal. It always meant something. It meant everything. The elevator ride down felt eternal, his fists clenched in his coat pockets. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He simply rewound every moment in his mind. The dinners, the laughter, the private yacht proposal under Santorini's sun. All lies. All part of a script he hadn't realized someone else was writing. When the elevator doors opened, the doorman gave a polite nod, oblivious to the fact that Alexander King's heart was currently being dissected, piece by calculated piece. That night, Alexander didn't go to a hotel. He went to his second penthouse downtown, a place no one knew about, not even Rebecca. It was supposed to be a secret escape, a retreat from the chaos. Now it became his war room. He poured himself a glass of Lagavulin, neat, and stared at his own reflection in the mirror. For the first time in years, he didn't see a man in control. He saw a man who had been outplayed. That realization didn't bring sorrow. It ignited something else. Cold, precise, revenge. The next morning, the tabloids exploded. "King and Queen crumble. Alexander King and Rebecca Monroe call off engagement." He didn't release a statement. He didn't need to. Silence, when deployed correctly, was a weapon. He returned to King Holdings as if nothing had happened. The staff whispered. Investors speculated, but none dared question him directly. His authority, even wounded, was absolute. Yet beneath the surface, a new strategy was taking shape. He watched Rebecca from afar. She was already back in the spotlight, faking tears on talk shows, spinning tales of a misunderstood romance and emotional distance. It was textbook PR, and it infuriated him. She wasn't suffering, she was performing. Alexander knew then that simple silence wouldn't be enough. She needed to feel what he felt, powerless, exposed, replaceable. In the heart of King Holdings' 84th floor, Alexander stood overlooking Manhattan. The city pulsed beneath him like a living beast. It used to thrill him. Now it just looked predictable. He needed a variable, a disruption, someone completely outside the ecosystem, someone Rebecca would never see coming. That's when he remembered her. The girl from the elevator, the one who'd kept her eyes down and mouth shut. Quiet, invisible, but when she'd caught his panic, she'd said only one thing. Breathe. He hadn't thought about her since, but now she became a thread he couldn't ignore. He called his assistant, Find out who was cleaning the executive floor 3 days ago. I want a full name, background, everything." The request was odd, but then again, Alexander King didn't make casual requests. Within an hour, the name arrived. Emma Collins, age 27, no criminal record, 2 part-time jobs, 1 eviction notice, 1 dead mother, and a resume no one ever bothered to read. He stared at her photo on the file. Brown eyes, tired, honest. It wasn't beauty that caught his attention. It was normalcy. She looked like someone who had nothing to hide because no one had ever asked her to. Perfect. He closed the file and pressed the intercom. "Bring her to my office, immediately." When Emma entered the room, she didn't look up right away. She wore her uniform like armor, stiff posture, eyes low, ready for reprimand. But Alexander didn't yell. He watched her, measured her silence. Then he said something she didn't expect. "I need your help." She blinked, confused. "Me, sir?" "Yes, you." A pause. "And I'll pay you more than you've ever imagined." She was cautious, smart but not naive. "What kind of help?" she asked slowly. He leaned forward. "I need you to play a part just for a while, and in return I'll change your life." Her breath hitched. "What part?" He didn't smile. "My fiancée." Emma Collins didn't sleep that night, not because of fear, though fear lingered, but because her mind refused to stop spinning. The man who ran billion-dollar companies, whose face adorned business magazines and whose net worth could rebuild cities, had just asked her to pretend to be his fiancée. It was absurd, unreal, and yet he had been dead serious. His voice didn't waver, his eyes didn't blink, and something in his tone made it clear. This wasn't a joke, this was a deal. At 6 a.m., Emma stood at her tiny bathroom sink, staring into a cracked mirror. Her reflection looked the same, slightly puffy eyes, loose hair tied back, no makeup. But inside, something felt different. Her usual morning anxiety was replaced by a strange, humming stillness. Like her life had suddenly paused at a junction with 2 signs. One led to normalcy, the other to chaos. She didn't know which direction to take, and she wasn't sure she had a choice. Back at King Holdings, Alexander was already in his office. He hadn't slept either. Instead, he'd spent the night crafting an airtight plan. If Emma agreed, they would debut their relationship at a charity gala the following week. It was the perfect venue, cameras, influencers, and the full force of Manhattan's elite. A public announcement, a performance, and a message to Rebecca. You were replaceable all along. When Emma entered his office at 8:01 a.m., she looked different. Not physically, but something in her eyes had hardened. She wasn't just the girl who scrubbed corners. She was someone weighing the value of her dignity. Alexander noticed it instantly. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. Emma replied softly, "I almost didn't." Then she added, "But I have conditions." That surprised him. Not her boldness, but her control. "Go on," he said, intrigued. "I want it in writing," Emma began. "A time limit. You said, just for a while. I want specifics." Alexander nodded. 6 weeks, that's enough. To make an impact." She nodded. "And I want protection. If this blows up, I don't want to be the only one left burning." Again, he didn't argue. He admired her pragmatism. "You'll have a lawyer, your own PR person, and a payout." He paused. "Half now, half later." Emma bit her lip. "Then I guess we have a deal." The transformation began that day. Alexander handed her over to Clara, his hyper-efficient assistant, who whisked her into a whirlwind of appointments, stylists, dentists, media consultants. "We're not changing who you are," Clara said. "We're just adjusting how people see you." But to Emma, every layer of polish felt like a piece of her disappearing. By the end of the day, she sat in a luxury dressing room, draped in a silk gown, wondering if the girl who used to clean toilets still existed beneath all the shine. Meanwhile, Alexander was dealing with fallout. Rumors about the broken engagement with Rebecca were multiplying. Paparazzi followed him to coffee shops. Anonymous blogs speculated wildly. One even claimed he was secretly gay and staging a relationship for optics. It was ridiculous, but irritating. He needed the story to shift. Fast. Emma was the key. She just didn't know how powerful she could be yet. Their first joint appearance wasn't the gala. It was unplanned. That Friday, a reporter ambushed Alexander outside his building. Emma, coincidentally exiting through the service door, got caught in the camera's frame. The image was perfect, her looking startled, him stepping protectively toward her. Within hours, it was everywhere. Is this Alexander King's mystery woman? New flame or rebound? Suddenly, the world was curious. Emma found herself trending online. Strangers dissected her expression, her clothes, even her shoes. And when the tabloids learned her name, the invasion escalated. She received messages, some curious, some cruel. Her Instagram, long abandoned, was flooded. One headline screamed, "From mop to mogul's muse, who is Emma Collins?" She stared at it in disbelief. "This is insane," she whispered. Alexander called her that night. "You okay?" he asked. She hesitated, then replied, "No, but I will be." He admired that answer more than he let on. "They're vultures," he said, "but vultures don't bother with nobodies. They circle power, and right now, you have it." She didn't feel powerful. She felt exposed. "Just don't forget why we're doing this," she said. "You wanted revenge. I just wanted to survive." The next morning, Alexander showed up at her apartment unannounced. "Come with me," he said. "There's something you need to see." She reluctantly followed. He drove her across town to a private rooftop where a team was setting up for the gala. "This is the battlefield," he said quietly, "and next week you'll walk in here and win." Emma looked around at the glass and lights and opulence. "You sure you want me as your weapon?" He looked her in the eyes. "I think you might be sharper than I realized." That night, as she stood alone on the rooftop, Emma thought about her mother, about every job she'd taken, every moment of humiliation she'd swallowed to get by. And she thought, if I can turn this into something real, something permanent, I won't have to run any more. But even then, she didn't see the storm coming. Not from Rebecca, not from the media, and definitely not from her own heart. The week passed in a blur of fittings, photo shoots, and etiquette lessons. Emma hadn't expected the charade to demand so much of her. Everything about her, how she walked, smiled, even how she held a champagne flute, was scrutinized. Clara, always composed and tactful, coached her with patience, but never warmth. "This isn't about perfection," she'd say. "It's about perception. They don't need to like you. They just need to believe you." Emma was learning quickly, but the toll was growing heavier with each passing day. Alexander, on the other hand, seemed untouched by the chaos. He carried himself with the same cold precision, his focus razor-sharp. They only interacted during rehearsed public outings and brief debriefs afterward. There was no warmth between them, no smiles beyond the ones they were paid to wear, but the tension was palpable. Emma began to notice the way his jaw clenched before interviews, the way his eyes flickered when flashbulbs went off. He wasn't as invincible as he seemed. It was late Thursday evening when everything changed. Emma had just finished a styling session on the 43rd floor of King Holdings. She stepped into the private elevator alone, her heels aching, her mind a tangle of doubts. The doors began to close until a hand stopped them. Alexander stepped in. For a moment, they both stood, in silence, surrounded by mirrored walls and golden accents. Then, without warning, the elevator jerked, stuttered, and stopped. The lights dimmed. The air turned still. Alexander immediately pressed the emergency button, but nothing happened. Emma, trying to stay calm, leaned against the wall. "Well," she said, forcing a breathless smile. "This is ironic." He glanced at her. "Why?" "Because the last time we were stuck together in a box, you offered me a fake engagement. Who knows what you'll propose this time?" Alexander didn't laugh. Instead, he sat down on the floor, removing his tie. "I hate elevators," he admitted, voice quieter than usual. "Small spaces, no control." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Control? That's your thing, isn't it?" He nodded slowly. "Always has been. Until Rebecca." The name hung in the air like a smoke ring, visible, delicate, poisonous. Emma sat opposite him. "Tell me something. Was it ever real? With her?" Alexander hesitated. Then, "It was. Once." That admission softened something in her. For weeks, she'd viewed him as this untouchable, robotic titan. But now, trapped in this luxury cage with him, she saw glimpses of something human. "And this?" she asked. "What we're doing, does any of it feel real to you?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes locked onto hers. "I thought you were just a pawn. Now I'm not so sure." Emma's breath caught slightly. Not because of the words, but because of how he said them. There was no strategy in his voice, no cold calculation, just truth, and it terrified her more than any lie. "I'm not trying to be anything I'm not," she whispered, "but every day I feel like I'm disappearing behind this role you built." Alexander leaned his head back against the elevator wall. "You think I haven't lost parts of myself too?" They sat there, the silence more intimate than any touch. The hum of the stalled elevator felt like the beat of a shared heart. Then Emma broke it. "Let's make a pact." He looked at her, intrigued. "A pact?" She nodded. "While we're in this together, no matter what happens out there, we tell each other the truth in here." Alexander studied her for a long time. "Deal," he said finally. "Only the truth, in the elevator." The system rebooted minutes later. The elevator resumed its glide toward the ground floor. Neither of them spoke again, but something between them had shifted, subtly, irreversibly. By the time the doors opened, they weren't just co-conspirators anymore. They were allies, maybe something more. Emma stepped out first, heels clicking softly. Alexander followed, his eyes lingering on her a moment longer than necessary. That night, Emma stood on her apartment balcony, looking out over the city. Her reflection in the window startled her. It wasn't the girl from a month ago. It wasn't even the girl from last week. This woman had steel in her spine, fire in her eyes, but also doubt. Because despite the glamour, the growing fame, and the money, a new thought had begun to haunt her. What if I'm not pretending anymore? And across the city, in a penthouse bathed in quiet, Alexander stared at his ceiling, replaying every word. She had said, "While we're in this together, only the truth in here." He wasn't sure what scared him more, that she was getting too close, or that he wanted her to. The gala was held at the Orchid Pavilion, a historic mansion-turned event, space nestled in the heart of Manhattan. The venue was all opulence, crystal chandeliers the size of cars, violinists positioned along marble staircases, and a red carpet longer than most city blocks. For most of New York's elite, it was just another opportunity to be seen. But for Alexander King, it was the battlefield, and Emma Collins, she was the bomb he was about to drop. Emma arrived in a midnight blue gown that hugged her figure like second skin. The fabric shimmered when she moved, catching the light in ways that made photographers gasp. Clara had outdone herself, crafting an image that whispered royalty without screaming for attention. Emma's hair was swept back in a loose chignon, a few strands escaping just enough to soften her angular features. When Alexander saw her descend the marble staircase, he paused, longer than he intended. "You look—" he started, then stopped. Emma raised an eyebrow. "Different," she offered, smirking. "Perfect," he said, voice almost too low to hear. For a moment, the air between them thickened, charged with something unspoken. Then he extended his arm, and she took it. Side by side, they stepped into the storm of flashing lights and fabricated glamour. The paparazzi roared. Questions flew like bullets. Who is she? Is this the new fiancée? What happened to Rebecca? Alexander ignored them all, guiding Emma down the carpet with steady grace. She followed his lead, chin high, smile poised. It was a performance, but it felt unsettlingly real, especially when Alexander's hand settled on the small of her back, not possessive, but protective. Inside, the ballroom shimmered like a fantasy. Crystal sculptures, gold-trimmed tableware, and floral arrangements tall enough to hide behind. The air buzzed with money and malice. Eyes turned instantly toward them. Some whispered, others stared, but the loudest silence came from the far side of the room, where Rebecca Monroe stood in a sequined crimson gown, flanked by executives and socialites. Emma felt the temperature drop. She recognized Rebecca from magazines, television, and those silent moments in Alexander's eyes. The woman was breathtaking, venomous, and still incredibly poised. When their eyes met, Emma didn't flinch. She nodded. Rebecca didn't respond, just raised her glass, smirking like she was watching a child pretend to be queen. Alexander led Emma to a table near the center. "Ignore her," he whispered. "She thrives on fear." Emma didn't answer. She couldn't. Her pulse was a thunderstorm, her palms damp despite the silk gloves. But she smiled, because that's what Emma Collins did now. She smiled through everything. And when a prominent hedge fund owner leaned in and said, "You're even more stunning in person," she simply replied, "I get that a lot." The night unfolded like a dance. One by one, socialites approached. Investors, influencers, reporters. They all wanted a piece of her. Who was she? Where did she come from? Emma deflected with elegance, a background in philanthropy, a love for architecture, a passion for privacy, lies, polished, gentle lies. But no one questioned them. No one dared. Then came the toast. Alexander stood, glass in hand, commanding the room without raising his voice. "Tonight isn't just a celebration of generosity," he said. "It's a celebration of new chapters." He turned slightly, offering Emma his hand. She rose. Gasps rippled. Cameras clicked. "Some of you have asked about the extraordinary woman beside me. So allow me to introduce her properly. Emma Collins, my fiancée." The room erupted. Applause. Murmurs. Rebecca's smile cracked for just a second. Emma could feel the heat of 100 eyes, but all she focused on was Alexander. His hand was steady, his eyes locked onto hers, and for a fraction of a heartbeat she forgot it was fake. They danced after the toast. It wasn't part of the plan, but the orchestra started something slow and haunting, and Alexander simply took her hand and pulled her in. "Is this for them?" Emma asked, breathless. "No," he said. "This part's for me." Her heart stuttered. He wasn't supposed to say things like that, and he definitely wasn't supposed to mean them. Later that night, after the cameras were gone and the wine had dried on their lips, they sat in the car in silence. Manhattan blurred by. Emma leaned her head against the window. "You meant what you said in there?" she asked quietly. Alexander didn't answer at first. Then, which part? That the dance was for you. He looked at her, and this time he didn't look away. "Yes." Emma turned back to the window, heart pounding, because she wasn't sure what was scarier, that he said it, or that she wanted him to. Emma hadn't even made it through. Her apartment door before her phone buzzed for the 17th time. The notifications were endless: tagged photos, DM requests, media mentions. Her name, once buried under minimum wage jobs and eviction notices, was now flashing on screens from coast to coast. She dropped the phone on the couch and let herself sink beside it. She had never felt so heavy in her life. Alexander had offered to drop her off personally, but she declined. After the gala, every second alone felt necessary, like coming up for air. She peeled off the gown, hung it with reverence in the garment bag, and stood in front of her bedroom mirror wearing only a tank top and leggings. Her reflection didn't show the woman from the photos. It showed someone who had been polished, yes, but also someone cracking beneath the surface. The next morning, Emma made the mistake of Googling herself. The search results were brutal. Comment threads tore her apart with glee. Gold digger, nobody. Where did he find her? Craigslist. Some speculated she had a sordid past. Others insisted she must be pregnant. The worst were the deep dives. Articles with cropped photos from years ago, pixelated and harsh. One had dug up a mugshot of her father, daughter of an ex-con now engaged. "To Wall Street's Ice King," the headline screamed. Emma stared at the screen, fists clenched. Her father. She hadn't spoken his name in years, and now it was viral. She turned off her phone and tossed it into the kitchen sink like it might burn her fingers. Her breathing quickened. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't signed up to be dissected by the world. But that was the thing. She had signed something. And now she couldn't unsign it. Later that day, Alexander summoned her to his office. She arrived early, hoping to avoid stairs, but the elevator opened to a hallway already buzzing with whispers. Clara intercepted her outside the glass door. "We need to talk," she said, her voice lower than usual. "There's noise online. It's growing." Emma stiffened. "I saw it." Clara handed her a printed article. "This one's worse. They're contacting your old landlords, employers, people who barely knew you." Emma scanned the article. Her stomach flipped. They had interviewed her former co-worker from a diner in Queens. The woman had casually mentioned Emma being quiet, maybe hiding something. That was enough. A dozen more headlines exploded within hours. Who is Emma Collins, really? Inside the office, Alexander stood at the window, unmoved as always. "We need to respond," he said. Emma sat tense. "I didn't expect it to get this personal." He turned to face her. "It always gets personal. That's how they tear people down, by reminding them they never belonged." His words were clinical, but his tone not entirely cold. "We'll control the narrative," he added. "We always do." Emma wasn't convinced. "And if I don't want to be part of this narrative anymore?" The room went quiet. He took a step toward her. "Then say the word. I'll pull the plug. You get your payout. I fix this another way." She blinked. She hadn't expected him to give her an out, but somehow that only made her feel worse. "I'm just not sure who I'm becoming," she admitted. Alexander didn't respond right away. Then he said, "Let me show you something." He took her to the company archives, rows of glass. Cases, timelines, awards, fabric swatches, photos of him with fashion icons, presidents, royals. He pointed to a photo. A boy in his teens, barely recognizable, in second-hand clothes, holding a sketchbook. "That was me," he said. "Before any of this, before they let me in." Emma stared. The boy's eyes were the same, guarded, searching, defiant. "I built this empire because I hated being invisible," he said. "You think I don't see what they're doing to you?" "I do. But you have a choice. Run now and confirm their story, or stay and rewrite it." Emma said nothing. But that night, when she returned to her apartment, she opened her laptop and wrote a statement herself, a single paragraph. Honest, vulnerable, fierce. She emailed it to Clara without saying a word. The statement went live the next morning. It wasn't polished PR. It was raw. Yes, I was a maid. Yes, I've made mistakes. But if rising from nothing makes me unworthy of love, success, or dignity, then what does that say about the rest of us? It went viral in minutes. And for the first time, the comments shifted. Maybe she's not who we thought. Maybe she's more. A single name, Emma Collins, now stood not just as a placeholder in Alexander King's narrative, but as something sharper, stronger, hers. And still, somewhere behind a penthouse curtain, Rebecca Monroe read every word and started to plan. The first message was subtle, an anonymous bouquet of red roses delivered to Alexander's penthouse. No note, no card, just a slick envelope tucked between the stems, sealed with crimson wax. Inside, a single photo, Alexander and Emma at the gala, circled in red. Underneath, typed in serif font, "She doesn't know you like I do." Alexander held the photo for a long time, staring not at the image, but the implication. It wasn't a threat. Not yet. It was a reminder. A whisper in the dark. "I'm watching." He crushed the paper in his hand and dropped it in the fireplace, but the embers in his gut stayed lit. Rebecca wasn't just reacting. She was escalating. Emma noticed it before he said anything. His steps grew tighter, his sentences shorter. He began carrying a burner phone, something he hadn't used since before his first major acquisition. At first, she assumed it was just the pressure, the headlines, the scrutiny. But one night, after he left the room, she checked the side table. The burner had a single missed call, labeled simply R. Emma didn't confront him. Not right away. She wasn't sure she had the right. But the distance between them started to stretch again, like elastic pulled too far. The warmth of the gala night faded. Rehearsals resumed, scheduled outings, dinners with pre-approved guests. But the glances between them were colder, calculated. Then Rebecca Monroe returned to the public stage. She didn't do an interview. That would have been too obvious. Instead, she hosted a private fundraiser for a children's literacy foundation and invited Alexander through the press. The event was invite only, but the media presence was overwhelming. Alexander read the announcement in the paper at breakfast, silently stirring his coffee. "You're not actually going," Emma said. It wasn't a question. Alexander looked up. "I wasn't planning to." She nodded, then added, "You should. If you don't, she wins this round. And I think you're tired of losing." He didn't smile, but he agreed. When they arrived, the room silenced. Rebecca greeted them at the top of the grand staircase like a queen descending from Olympus. She wore red, of course, the color of danger, seduction, war. Her smile was a blade wrapped in silk. "Alexander," she purred, stepping forward, "and the lady of the hour." Emma extended her hand before Rebecca could finish the insult. "Lovely to finally meet you, Rebecca. You photograph well, but in person, you're much sharper." There was a flicker in Rebecca's eyes. Surprise, maybe admiration. Then the smile widened. "Charming. I see Alexander has trained you well." The night was a slow burn. Rebecca never attacked outright. Instead, she wove stories from the past, little anecdotes about trips, inside jokes, things that made Emma feel like a spectator at her own engagement party. Alexander played along with polite disinterest, but Emma saw it. The tension in his jaw, the flicker in his pupils. Rebecca still got to him. Near the end of the night, as Emma stepped away to take a call from Clara, Rebecca cornered Alexander on the balcony. "She's cute," she said, sipping champagne, "but temporary." Alexander didn't bite. "Is this your endgame, petty sabotage?" Rebecca leaned closer. "Oh, Alex, you think this is sabotage?" She smiled. "This is foreplay." He stared at her, expression unreadable. Then she said it. The one thing she knew would land. "She doesn't know about Prague, does she?" His face changed. Slightly. But enough. Rebecca's smile sharpened. Didn't think so. Later, that night in the car, Emma finally broke the silence. What happened in Prague? Alexander's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. Nothing important. That's a lie, she said softly. And we made a pact, remember? His jaw flexed. Not tonight. Emma didn't push, but she didn't let it go either. The trust they'd built was now fraying at the edges, like a dress worn too many times. She began to wonder if the person Alexander was building her to become had a shelf life, if she was just a mask until he reclaimed what he'd lost. And back at her suite, Rebecca was already reviewing a folder thick with documents, photos, and emails. She had no intention of fading into the background, because the war for Alexander King's soul had only just begun, and if she couldn't have him, no one would. The rain in Prague was different. It didn't pound, it whispered, thin and constant, like a secret being passed from roof to roof. Alexander remembered it vividly. The damp scent of cobblestone, the glow of street lamps near Charles Bridge, the way every shadow felt alive. He hadn't been back since the incident, but the memory of that winter, of what happened to Luca Mendez, was stitched into his bones. Back then, Alexander had just finalized a controversial merger with Volcal Industries, a Czech-German biotech firm. It was meant to be clean, clinical, surgical, but it spiraled fast. Rumors of insider trading, blackmail, and political leverage circulated through back channels. One night, Luca, his closest confidant on the European team, vanished. 2 weeks later, a body washed up in the Vltava River. No charges, no answers, just whispers. And Rebecca had been there. Not just by his side, she was his accomplice. She'd handled the lawyers, managed the press, but what Alexander never told anyone was that she'd also silenced Luca's widow with a bribe he hadn't authorized. A bribe that later reappeared in the firm's internal audit under an employee compensation anomaly. That anomaly had cost him the board's trust for a year. That was what Rebecca meant by Prague. Not a place, a threat. Back in Manhattan, Emma stood in the conservatory of Alexander's penthouse, staring at a photograph on the wall. It was one of those artful black and whites, mist curling over a European bridge. She now recognized the skyline. "You've been hiding something," she said, as Alexander entered the room. He paused mid-step, unguarded for once. "Prague," she added. "Talk." Alexander didn't speak for a while. Then he sat, elbows on knees, palms pressed together. "There are things I've done I'm not proud of," he began. "Things I've done to survive, to win." Emma folded her arms. "Did someone die because of you?" His jaw tightened. "No, but someone died near me, and I didn't ask enough questions when it counted." He told her everything. About Luca, about the silence, about Rebecca's role, about the price paid, not in dollars, but in weight he still carried. Emma listened, arms dropping, her breath shallower with each sentence. When he finished, she didn't speak right away. Finally, "You should have told me before any of this." "I didn't want you to see that part of me," Alexander said. "I needed you to believe in the version of me that doesn't. Flinch doesn't compromise." She shook her head. "But I don't need perfect, I need real. We both made a deal built on masks. But I can't keep pretending you're just ruthless. You're human, which means I can't protect you if you keep protecting yourself." Alexander rose and walked toward the glass. Below them, the city buzzed. "She's going to use this," he said, "to destroy everything." Emma walked up beside him. "Then let her try. But next time she throws fire, you throw truth." That night, Emma drafted a statement. She didn't tell Alexander. She posted it alone, just before midnight. No spin, just facts. Transparency is a choice. It's also the first step toward redemption. Then she attached the story, her version of Prague. cleaned, focused, but honest enough to stir the pot. The response was instant. Some applauded, others called it a distraction tactic, but Alexander's board, who had watched silently for weeks, finally responded. They called a meeting. Emma was invited. Rebecca saw the article an hour after it, posted. Her wineglass cracked in her hand. She hadn't expected Emma to strike first, and not with spin, but with honesty. It was reckless, it was dangerous, and worst of all, it was working. As Emma closed her laptop, exhausted, she turned to find Alexander at the doorway. "You knew?" he asked. "I had to," she said. "Someone has to lead this story before it writes itself." For the first time in weeks, he smiled. "Just slightly. You're becoming better at this than me." Emma stepped closer. "Maybe, or maybe I just finally decided to stop surviving and start owning." And deep inside that moment, as silence held them together like gravity, a strange, impossible thought took root in both their minds. What if this stops being fake? The boardroom at King Holdings wasn't just a space, it was a throne room. Everything about it projected power. The chairs were imported Italian leather, the table carved from a single block of rare African hardwood, and the ceiling lit by a chandelier custom designed to mimic constellations. Most meetings held here were swift, calculated, and absolute. But today, something different hung in the air, tension wrapped in curiosity. Emma sat beside Alexander, her hands folded, back straight. She wore navy silk, not too flashy, but not forgettable. Across from her sat 11 board members, each representing billions of dollars and egos just as inflated. Some knew her only through headlines. Others had met her briefly in hallways. None had expected her to be seated at the table like she belonged there. That was her advantage. Alexander opened the meeting with precision. "You've all read the article. I won't waste your time denying what's already been owned." A murmur passed between two board members. "This meeting isn't about rehashing the past," he continued. "It's about how we move forward." Then he gestured toward Emma, and the person who made that possible. That startled them. A few narrowed their eyes. One cleared his throat, unimpressed. "With all due respect, Mr. King, why is she here?" Emma didn't flinch. She looked the man, Warren Doyle, straight in the eye. "Because I'm not the PR stunt you think I am," she said, calm and even. "I'm the reason your stock didn't nosedive this week." A pause. Then she stood. "Let's be clear," she continued. "I'm not a shareholder. I don't pretend to understand your metrics better than you, but I understand people. And when people don't trust leadership, everything crumbles. Fast." She tapped a tablet displaying real-time analytics from their social media campaign. "Before my statement went live, King Holdings was trending for all the wrong reasons. Now, we're leading a conversation about transparency, about transformation. That shift, that was intentional." The room quieted. The room. Emma let the silence stretch before finishing. "I'm not here to replace anyone. I'm here because I believe companies like this one need more than numbers. They need narratives. And right now, I'm the only person in this building who controls the narrative that the world is watching." Alexander watched her closely. She hadn't rehearsed any of this. It wasn't written for her. This was Emma, raw, real, undeniable. The same woman who had once mopped floors in this building was now commanding the table where empires were shaped. And the board saw it too. Not all nodded, but none interrupted. Warren Doyle leaned back in his chair, assessing her anew. "Miss Collins, you've made your point." Emma gave him a polite nod, then sat back down beside Alexander. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs, but she didn't show it. She simply crossed her legs, picked up her water, and waited. When the meeting adjourned, several members approached Emma individually, small talk, testing the waters. One even asked if she'd ever considered a formal position in communication strategy. She declined. politely, but that offer alone was proof. She was no longer the outsider. She was a player now. As they left the room, Alexander placed a hand on her lower back. It wasn't for show. There were no cameras. It was supportive. "You didn't have to do that," he said softly. Emma looked up at him. "Yes, I did. You're not the only one with something to lose anymore." Later that night, back in the penthouse, Emma stood by the fireplace while Alexander poured 2 glasses of wine. "They won't question you again," he said. She shook her head. "They'll question me every time. That's the difference. Between being born into this and clawing your way in." He handed her a glass. "Then we keep clawing." She raised her glass, tapping his. "To truth, to power, and to whatever the hell we're becoming." The wine warmed her throat, but his eyes, they warmed something deeper. Meanwhile, far uptown, Rebecca Monroe met with a shadowed figure in a private lounge. "They think they've won," she whispered, sliding over a manila folder. "But they forgot one thing." The figure opened it, brows lifting. "Is this verified?" Rebecca's smile was cold and perfect. "It will be. And when it is, everything they built together will burn." The folder arrived on a Tuesday. It wasn't sent by courier. No logo, no return address. Just a plain manila envelope slipped under the office door while Clara was out for lunch. Alexander found it first. His name was scrawled on the front in block letters, no salutation, no threat, but he recognized the handwriting. Instantly, Rebecca. He didn't open it, not immediately. Instead, he placed it on the desk like it might explode. For 20 full minutes, he paced the room, poured a drink, sipped it, poured another, then finally sat and slid his fingers under the flap. Inside were photos, documents, names he hadn't heard in years. Emma's face stared back at him from a grainy surveillance still, leaving a building in Brooklyn 3 years ago. Behind her, a man. His face was blurred. The file called him Subject X. Attached was a report. Emma Collins associated with David Flint, suspected involvement in document theft from Argus Pharmaceuticals 2020. Charges never filed. Evidence suppressed. Alexander froze. He read it again, then again. He'd vetted her, or thought he had. She'd passed background checks, credit scans, social audits. But this wasn't in any database, because someone didn't want it to be, someone like Rebecca, or someone she'd paid. He didn't call Emma. Instead, he locked the folder in the safe behind his desk and told Clara to clear his afternoon. He needed time to think, to feel, though he hated admitting it. What bothered him more than the contents was the silence. The fact Emma never said anything. Not about the theft, not about David, not about Brooklyn. Downstairs, Emma was walking out of a meeting with their branding consultant. She'd pitched a campaign centered around accessibility and luxury fashion, featuring women from non-traditional backgrounds. The idea had been well received. She felt good, confident, but as soon as she stepped back into the elevator, her phone vibrated. Unknown number. She answered, static, then a voice, familiar, chilling. "Emma," it said. "Do you think he knows yet?" She froze. "Who is this?" "I'm not your enemy," the voice said. "But Rebecca is, and if you think she's done, you don't know her at all." The line went dead. Emma stood there, heartbeat hammering. She'd changed her number, wiped her history. David was gone. That part of her life, gone. But suddenly it wasn't. It was back, and it had a voice. That evening, Alexander avoided dinner. Emma knocked on his office door once, then twice. No answer. When she opened it, he was sitting at the desk, staring into a fire that wasn't lit. "You're quiet," she said gently. He didn't turn, just held something in his hand, the folder. She recognized it immediately. "Where did you get that?" she asked, her voice small. He looked up at her, eyes hard. "You tell me." Emma didn't lie. She sat down. She told him everything, about David, about the job, about the desperation. How she hadn't known it was criminal until it was too late. How she'd run when it turned bad. How she'd never touched the files. How she'd never been charged, but how she'd also never told anyone. Alexander listened, and when she was done, he didn't speak. Not right away, just stared, and it was that silence, more than the folder, more than the file, that broke her. "I didn't tell you because I thought it would ruin what we were building," she whispered. He finally stood. "What are we building, Emma? A relationship or a better lie?" That cut, deeper than she expected. She stood too, but not out. Of defiance, out of desperation. "You asked me to be part of your lie, remember? I'm not the only one with ghosts." He flinched. They stood inches apart, breathing the same pain, the same fear. Two people who wanted desperately to trust, but didn't know how. Then finally he reached for her hand. "Don't let this be the end," he said. Emma nodded. "Then let's stop hiding." The next morning, Alexander placed a call. "Put a team on Rebecca Monroe. I want to know everything, and this time no lines we won't cross, because if Emma's past could be dug up, so could hers, and he had a feeling Rebecca's skeletons were far more dangerous." The invitation was handwritten, sealed in a gold-embossed envelope, delivered not by courier, but by personal assistant. It bore the insignia of Verite, Manhattan's most exclusive dining club, a place so elite that even billionaires needed connections to reserve a table. The invitation was addressed to Rebecca Monroe, but signed by Alexander King. She read it twice. Dinner, no cameras, no audience, just truth. Rebecca smiled. She smelled a trap, and she liked it. That night, she arrived precisely at 8. Her dress was obsidian velvet, slit to the thigh, her heels sharp enough to draw blood. She entered the private dining suite to find Alexander already seated, a crystal decanter half empty, 2 glasses of Burgundy breathing on the table. No Emma, just him. She liked that even more. "You're early," he said, rising as she approached. "You're predictable," she replied, accepting the chair he pulled for her. "But points for drama. I almost wore red, just for the poetry." The waiter disappeared. Doors closed. Silence reigned. For several minutes they didn't speak, just sipped, observed, calculated. Then Alexander set down his glass. "You crossed a line, Rebecca." Her eyes twinkled. "Which one?" "There are so many." He slid a flash drive across the table. "You planted a file on Emma, fake intel, half-truths, hacked security footage. I traced the source. Your signature was all over it." She didn't even blink. "Prove it in court." "I don't need court," he said, calm. "I just need motive, and I think I finally understand yours." Rebecca leaned in, chin resting on perfectly manicured fingers. "Oh, enlighten me." "You don't want me back," he said. "You want me broken. Because if I can be happy with someone else, then it proves you were never the queen. Just a placeholder, a phase." She laughed, a low melodic sound. "Darling, you always mistook survival for love. I protected you in Prague. You forget that." He narrowed his eyes. "No, I remember everything, including the bribe you paid to Luca's widow." The laughter stopped. "I didn't tell Emma about that," he added. "But I might, if you keep pushing." Rebecca's face hardened. "So this is blackmail. Now, no, this is mercy," he said. "The next move is yours." She stood collected, unfazed on the surface. But as she turned to leave, she hesitated. "You think she's different from me? That she won't hurt you the same way?" "She already has," Alexander replied, "and I still chose her." That made Rebecca pause. Outside the dining suite, Emma waited. She had insisted on it. "Let me watch her walk away. Just once." Rebecca met her gaze, expression unreadable. "You're good," she said, "but this city eats girls like you." Emma held her eyes. "Then I'll make it choke." Rebecca's heels clicked down the marble hall, each step echoing like a retreat. Emma walked into the suite as Alexander poured the last of the wine. He didn't say anything, just handed her the glass. "You really did that for me?" she asked. "For us," he corrected. "I told you I'd stop hiding. This is what that looks like." They clinked glasses. The sound was softer than it should have been, but real. And neither of them noticed the shadow watching from the stairwell. A photographer with a silent lens, bought and paid for, but not by Rebecca, by someone else. Because far away, in a penthouse neither of them had visited before, a new player was moving into place. Someone who wanted everything. The file was buried in a vault in Switzerland, registered under a false name, protected by layers of legal anonymity. But Alexander had access now, thanks to a private investigator in Prague who owed him favors. And what he found inside changed everything. It wasn't about Rebecca, not this time. It was about Nathaniel King, a name he hadn't heard in years, a name he'd almost convinced himself didn't matter. But it did, because Nathaniel was his half-brother. Illegitimate. Conceived during a short-lived affair, their father had kept hidden from the press and boardrooms alike. When the elder King died, Nathaniel had been paid off, quietly, sent overseas with enough money to stay comfortable, but not enough to challenge the throne. Until now. Emma watched Alexander from the doorway of his study, his shoulders hunched. Over the file, his jaw tight. She didn't interrupt, but she didn't leave either. Finally, he looked up. "My father was a monster in silk," he said. "I knew that, but I didn't realize how many shadows he left behind." Emma stepped closer. "This Nathaniel, what does he want?" Alexander handed her a printout, a legal motion. "Control," he said. "He's contesting the inheritance, claiming I manipulated the will, that I coerced our father in his final days." He paused. "If he wins, he gets 40% of King holdings." Emma scanned the document. "Is it possible?" "No," Alexander said. "But this isn't about winning in court. It's about shaking the cage, making noise, eroding trust." And it was working. 2 days later, the media was ablaze. Secret. Son of billionaire CEO emerges to challenge fortune. Photos of Nathaniel surfaced, rugged, charismatic, polished like a politician. Interviews followed, always calm, always vague. But beneath the civility was a clear message. Alexander King is unfit to lead. The board was rattled, investors spooked. Rebecca, ironically, said nothing publicly, but privately leaked sound bites that painted Alexander as volatile, emotionally compromised, possibly even paranoid. Emma sat beside him through it all. But she wasn't just watching, she was planning. That evening, she called in a favor from a reporter she'd once served coffee to during her diner days. "You want the real story?" she said. "Then come interview me." The piece went live the next morning. Who is Nathaniel King? The woman beside Alexander speaks out. Emma didn't accuse. She didn't slander. She simply told her truth. "Alexander isn't perfect," she said, "but he's fought for everything he has. He didn't inherit this world. He built it. And if anyone thinks a shadow can undo that, then they don't understand what it means to lead." The article exploded. Not just because of what she said, but because of how she said it. Calm, measured, sincere, the public rallied. The board postponed their emergency review. And Alexander, he finally exhaled. That night, as the city shimmered beneath their balcony, he wrapped his arms around her waist from behind. "You didn't have to do that," he whispered. Emma leaned back against him. "You keep saying that, but I did. I still do." He turned her around, eyes searching. "Why?" She didn't answer right away. Then, "Because I believe in the man you're trying to become, not the one they keep dragging back into the past." And for the first time, he kissed her. Not out of obligation, not for show, but real, honest, dangerous, because somewhere, miles away, Nathaniel King sat in a private club, watching the footage on a loop, and he smiled. "They're in love," he said to his associate. "That's good." "Why?" the man asked. Nathaniel took a sip of whiskey. "Because love is the one thing you can always use to break someone." The fire didn't start with flames. It started with a letter, unmarked envelope, no return address, delivered to Emma's suite, slipped under her door, just like the folder had been. She hesitated before opening it, but curiosity won. Inside was a single page, typed. "Before Alexander met you, he had someone else silenced, someone you remind him of. There was no name, no signature, just a timestamp, a date from 3 years ago, followed by a file name, K.H. Blackcase, confidential witness, NUS 12, and a location, Midtown, basement archive, sealed." Emma stared at it, her breath shallow. She knew manipulation when she saw it, but still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something real lived behind that page, something hidden, something ugly. She didn't tell Alexander, not right away. Instead, she slipped out the next afternoon, told Clara she had a personal errand, rode the subway like she used to, hoodie up, avoiding eye contact. She found the address, a derelict storage facility tucked between skyscrapers. Gentrification hadn't touched it yet. Inside, the air smelled like dust and time. She bribed the clerk with cash and a lie. Research project, old family archives. He didn't care. Just handed her a key and waved her down the hall. The unit was cold, industrial, boxes everywhere, some labeled, others blank. It took her 20 minutes to find the file. Confidential witness number 12. She opened it. What she found inside made her knees weaken. Photos, a transcript. A woman, young, brunette with eyes like hers, accusing King Holdings of suppressing a product study, claiming Alexander had personally signed off on its removal. The study had warned of neurological side effects. 2 patients were later hospitalized. The case was quietly settled. She disappeared. There was a note paperclipped to the back. No known current address. Believed relocated under NDA. Emma stared at the woman's photo, not because of the accusation, but because the woman looked eerily familiar, not in the face, but in the eyes, in the shape of pain behind them, the kind you don't fake. She didn't take the file, just copied the first few pages on her phone. Then she left, hands shaking. When she returned, Alexander was in the study. He smiled at her, soft and unguarded. "Where were you?" She didn't answer. "Not directly. Do you remember the case against Velkel Pharma?" she asked. 3 years ago, a whistleblower, someone who said your company buried a trial." His smile faded. "That was sealed," he said. "How do you know about that?" She didn't raise her voice. "Because I found the file, and her name, and the NDA." Alexander stood, tense now. "It wasn't what it looked like. The trial was incomplete. The board rushed it. I didn't bury it. I delayed it." "Then why the payoff?" she pressed. "Why the NDA? Why did she vanish?" His silence spoke louder than a confession. Emma stepped back. "You said you'd stop hiding. You promised me." "I was protecting the company," he said. "And her. It got ugly. Legal threats, smear campaigns. We paid her to go somewhere safe." "Did she want that?" Emma asked. "Or did you decide that for her?" The silence deepened, and with it, the trust between them cracked. Emma left before he could stop her. Didn't slam the door. Didn't cry. Just walked. Block after block, past lights and sirens and the pulse of a city she no longer felt anchored to. At the end of the street, her phone rang. She answered without thinking. Nathaniel's voice. "You know now," he said softly. "You finally see him the way I always have." "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Because he's not the victim," Nathaniel said. "And neither are you, but you might be, unless you pick a side." She hung up, but the voice stayed. The storm rolled in after midnight. Thunder cracked over the skyline like war drums. Rain hit the windows of the penthouse in steady, angry sheets. Inside, Emma sat alone in the study, the dim light from the fireplace dancing across her face. She hadn't spoken to Alexander in 2 days, not a text, not a call, just silence. But tonight, she was done waiting. She rose, raincoat in hand, and took the elevator to the top, his private suite. The door was unlocked. Inside, Alexander stood by the window, staring at the chaos outside. He didn't turn when she entered. He knew it was her. Maybe he'd been hoping she'd come, or maybe he feared it. "I read the full report," Emma said. Her voice was calm, controlled, but something raw laced beneath it. "The woman's name was Lydia. She was 25. She trusted your company." Alexander's back stayed to her. "I never meant for her to disappear." "But she did," Emma said. "And you let it happen. Because it was easier to erase than to let the world see you fail." He turned then, slowly. "I wasn't protecting myself. I was protecting everything I'd built. Thousands of jobs, billions in assets. One story, true or not, would have brought it all down." "And that justifies silence?" she asked. "You think money absolves you from morality?" "I think survival requires sacrifices," he said. "You of all people should understand that." That stopped her, cut her. "I do," she said. "I do understand sacrifice. I've made them my whole life, but I never buried someone to protect my image." He stepped closer. "Emma, no," she said. "Let me finish." Her hands were trembling now, but she kept her voice steady. "I came into this as a game. A lie, a distraction for you and a way out for me. But somewhere along the line it stopped being fake. I started believing in you, in us." His eyes softened. "So did I." "Then why didn't you trust me with the truth?" "I didn't want to lose you," he said. She shook her head. "You never had me, not fully, because you were still holding on to the version of yourself that believes control equals love. That power makes pain acceptable." The rain outside grew louder. He stepped even closer, inches now. "I want to be better," he said. "For you." Her breath caught. "I'm not asking you to fix me," he continued. "I'm asking you to stay while I fix myself, to believe that I can." She stared at him, and for a long moment the room held its breath. Then she said, "I don't want to be your second redemption, Alexander. I want to be your first choice." His jaw tightened. "You are. Then prove it." "How?" "Tell the board," she said. "Tell the world about Lydia, about what happened, not with a spin, not through me, through you. Own it. That could destroy everything." "Then rebuild," she said, "with clean hands." Silence. Then slowly he nodded. "I'll do it." Emma exhaled, tears she didn't know she was holding welling in her eyes. "Then maybe there's still something left to save." They stood in that fragile pause, staring at each other like survivors in the ruins of a fire they both helped start. And when he finally reached for her, she didn't pull away. But in the shadows of a nearby office, a security camera caught the whole scene, and that footage was already being copied and sold. Because while Emma and Alexander found their truth, the world was sharpening its knives. The ceremony was supposed to be symbolic. A private gathering at the Halcyon estate, Alexander's countryside property just outside the city. No press, no vows. Just close allies, a few board members, and a quiet moment to reset the narrative. A celebration of resilience, the official invite read. A staged, serene illusion of peace. But nothing about that day was peaceful. Emma arrived separately. Clara had insisted on it. "Keep the mystique," she said. But in truth, Emma welcomed the distance. Her heart was a battlefield, still unsure if it had survived the war. She wore ivory. No veil, no lace, just a sleek dress with clean lines and no apology. When she stepped out of the car, all eyes turned. Alexander stood at the top of the stone steps, flanked by marble columns and soft instrumental music. He wore black and black, no tie, no frills, just him, stripped of the empire, standing like a man with nothing left to hide. As she approached, the music dimmed. They didn't kiss, not yet, just hands joined, fingers interlocked. A quiet tension between them that said, "We're not whole, but we're here." The officiant, a judge Alexander trusted, began the speech. It was vague, carefully written, about growth, about truth, about choosing transparency over comfort. Emma barely heard it. Her mind was spinning, because in the back row, someone unexpected had just arrived. Rebecca Munro, wearing white. She stood calmly, perfectly composed, like she belonged there. No one had invited her. No one dared remove her. Her presence alone shifted the temperature of the entire space. Even the trees seemed to lean in closer. Alexander saw her, but he didn't flinch. Emma didn't turn around until Rebecca spoke. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, her voice slicing through the silence like a violin string snapping. "But I thought this was about truth." The officiant froze. All eyes turned. Cameras, once discreet, now lifted. Alexander stepped forward. "Rebecca, leave! This isn't your stage." But she smiled. "Oh, Alex, I'm not here for the stage. I'm here for the audience." She pulled a remote from her clutch and pressed a button. A projector flickered to life behind her. On the screen, footage from the penthouse. Emma and Alexander, the confrontation, the kiss, the confessions. The audience gasped, not because of the intimacy, but because of the vulnerability, the cracks, the pain. It wasn't a scandal, it was raw. Rebecca had intended it as a weapon, but she had misunderstood the story. Emma stepped down the stairs, heels echoing. "Is that all, Rebecca?" The woman blinked, caught off guard. "Because if it is," Emma continued, "then thank you. You just gave the world proof that this," she gestured to the screen, "is real." Rebecca faltered, just slightly. "You think this ends with a video?" "No," Emma said. "It ends with you walking away, and me choosing not to become you." Gasps, whispers. The tide shifted. Alexander joined her at the bottom of the steps. "You've lost the narrative," he said softly, "and you've already lost me." Rebecca stared for a long moment. Then she smiled, thin, resigned, almost admiring. She left without another word. The ceremony resumed, but this time no one looked at the officiant. They looked at Alexander and Emma, and for once the silence meant something different. Not scandal, not shame, just survival, just love, just truth. The estate was quiet the next morning. The guests had gone. The staff moved like ghosts through the halls. Rain had returned, soft and steady, washing the marble steps where Rebecca had tried to detonate everything, but the explosion had never come, not the way she'd imagined, because truth, when spoken with conviction, is harder to weaponize. Emma stood by the lake, shoes off, dress soaked at the hem, eyes locked on the water, like it could offer answers. Behind her, Alexander approached slowly. No suit, just a sweatshirt, hands in pockets, like any other man trying to hold on to something real. "You didn't have to protect me yesterday," he said. Emma turned. "I wasn't protecting you. I was protecting us." He nodded, silent, thoughtful. "The truth's out now," she added. "Not just about us, about Lydia, about Prague, about all of it." "Yes," he said, "which means there's nothing left to hide behind." "No," he agreed again. A beat, then she asked, "So what now?" Alexander stepped closer. "Now, I leave King Holdings." That hit harder than she expected. "What?" "I've already drafted the letter," he said, "effective in 30 days. I'll transition out, step down from the board." "But why?" she asked. "You won. You survived." He smiled, just faintly. "But I didn't change, not really. And if I stay, I won't." She stared at him. "You were right," he continued. "The power, the image, it became who I was. I built a fortress so high I forgot how to breathe inside it. I don't want to live like that anymore. I don't want us to live like that." Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from recognition. "Then what do you want?" she whispered. He stepped closer. "I want mornings without board memos, nights without spin. I want a life built on small truths, messy, honest, real." She nodded slowly. "And me?" "You," he said, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. "You're the only part of this that was never fake. But the choice is yours." The wind picked up, cold and earthy. Emma looked down at the lake again. She thought of the girl who once scrubbed floors and whispered dreams into cracked bathroom mirrors. She thought of the woman who stood up to billionaires, who looked trauma in the eye and didn't flinch. She thought of every lie and every moment that somehow became real. Then she looked back at him. "I don't want your empire," she said. He smiled. "Good, I don't want it either. But I do want the man who let it go," she said. And with that, she stepped forward and kissed him. Not for the cameras, not for a contract, just because it was time. Later, headlines spun again. Alexander King steps down. Billionaire chooses love over legacy. Emma never gave another interview. They moved somewhere quieter, not off-grid, but far from the skyline. Alexander taught kids finance at a public school. Emma started a foundation in Lydia's name, and every night before bed they repeated the same words: no lies, no masks, just us. Because in the end, love wasn't the performance. It was the choice, the real one. If you've made it this far, let us know what you thought about the story. Rate it from 1 to 10 in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you're not subscribed yet, don't forget to subscribe to catch all our upcoming stories.